Our committee has been tasked with identifying and addressing the multiple issues facing equity-seeking groups in our academic community. And as part of our mandate, we have made this video to commemorate the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, also known as Orange Shirt Day. Here, members of our committee will reflect on what this day means to them and what they are doing to observe it. We are doing this in the spirit of truth, of reconciliation, and also of active engagement, and we're encouraging everybody to do the same. So in June, Ottawa declared September 30th as the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. This is a federally recognized statutory holiday that addresses one of the 94 calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It provides public servants an opportunity to recognize the legacy and ongoing trauma of the residential school system, and the University of Alberta has also chosen to recognize this day. September 30th has roots in Orange Shirt Day, which was declared in 2013 as a day to recognize the harm done by the residential school system, but also survivor resilience. The orange shirt comes from the experience of Phyllis Webstad, who is a Northern Secwepemc member of the Stiquama First Nation. And on her first day at the mission school in Williams Lake, she was proudly wearing her new orange shirt that her granny had bought her. But when she arrived at the school, like many of her peers, she was stripped of her own personal clothing and given a standard uniform to wear. Phyllis explained in her own words that the color orange has always reminded me of that, and how my feelings didn't matter, and how no one cared, and how I felt like I was worth nothing. So this powerful reclamation of the color orange on this day honors survivors like Phyllis and serves as a point of recognition and remembrance for all of us.
The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, to me, is about reflecting on the injustices of the past caused by the Indian residential school system, their legacy that continues into the present, and how better relations amongst diverse peoples, Indigenous and settler, can be created in the land that we now call Canada. It's a day to allow the suffering caused by the residential school system to speak, to learn about the truth, and to think about how one can play an active part in the process of reconciliation.
The National Day of Truth and Reconciliation is a very significant way to commemorate tragic history of residential schools, but at the same time, to me, this is just the first step toward wider recognition and more research. If I take Japanese Canadians from my research area as an example, they were one of the first groups that achieved reconciliation with the federal government with an apology from Prime Minister Brian Mulroney in 1988. But after more than 30 years, new facts and more sources kept emerging. So I hope on this day we will remember that more things and more research must be done to recognize the legacy of residential school.
For me, the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation is a twofold opportunity. First, it is an opportunity for me to educate myself and to recognize my responsibility to educate myself with the truth of what occurred at residential schools and the impact that they still have on our society today. Secondly, it is an opportunity for me to reflect on what reconciliation looks like in my own life, to think about how I can take steps towards it on a daily basis.
Hello, Dansia Talia Karuvise. I am an immigrant to Canada. I grew up on the East Coast, and I currently live and work in Treaty 6 territory in Amiskwasi, Waskahita. For me, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is an opportunity to reflect, to recognize and deepen my knowledge of the Indigenous peoples who have lived on this land, and of the harms that have been done to them over the years. It's a day in which I can do a little bit of extra work towards rectifying those harms.
Being a Ukrainian, I do believe that I can understand the meaning and power of historical legacy and historical traumas. Ukrainian history is full of them. The Ukrainian national bard Taras Shevchenko wrote a poem, The Excavated Grave, in 1843, when he searched for historical truth about his nation. Ukrainian collective identity is based on history. That is why history and policy in post-Soviet Ukraine are deeply intertwined. Understandably, I cannot help but compare Ukrainian and Canadian experience of dealing with their traumatic past. In both countries, the policy of memory or the policy of identity is aimed at strengthening national unity. However, the results remain different. Let me tell you that I see with admiration on how the Canadian society reacted to the grim discovery of the Indian residential school system. My impression is that in spite of several disturbing incidents, the society demonstrates its political maturity and national coherence. Compared to Ukrainians and some other European nations, Canadians are able to come to terms with their past without being obsessed or overwhelmed with history. That is why I believe the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation will be a solid contribution to the national unity.
My family members attended the Kamloops Indian Residential School in Squamish Territory. Some of them survived and many did not. So for me, this day is both deeply personal, but it's also professional. It's a moment for me to reflect on the conditions my family members and other Indigenous people were forced to exist under, and to recognize the incredible strength in survival, in resistance, and in resurgence.
One of the ways I'll be recognizing the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is using it as a day for reflection on how I can be an ally and be a better ally in the process of healing and reconciliation in this country. And one of the ways of actively doing that, firstly, is buying an orange shirt from a source that benefits Indigenous communities or charities, and also making a donation to the Indian Residential School Survivors Society. In addition to things like learning about the residential school system and the harmful impacts that continue to today, this is one means of being an active part of this process of reconciliation.
I recognize this day discussing the legacy from children's perspectives as the mother of two 5-year-old girls. They still don't fully understand what happened and sometimes get scared, but to me it is very important to discuss with parents how these kids felt like in the residential schools and what it was like to be separated from their mom and dad at their age, using booklets that their school provided and watching CBC cartoons created by residential school survivors. So this became a very important tradition.
It is an opportunity for me to reflect on what reconciliation looks like in my own life, to think about how I can take steps towards it on a daily basis. For me, that means starting reading and understanding the 94 calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and reflecting upon how I can incorporate these calls to action into my daily life. Therefore, I hope to do two things this September 30th. Firstly, as I am very passionate about music, I hope to find some Indigenous artists and musicians here in Canada and to listen to their music. Secondly, I hope to be able to spend that time with the 94 calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee and to reflect upon them and to reflect upon what they mean for me on a personal level. Thank you.
As part of my job, I teach languages that could be considered dead, although they're still pretty lively, Latin and Greek. I've tried to build into my daily routine a little bit of learning of the languages of the Indigenous peoples of this land. And so on September the 30th, I'm going to spend some extra time doing that. And I'm going to challenge you to find an Indigenous content provider that will give you a little bit of opportunity to play in the languages as well. These can be really engaging and fun things to do, so I highly recommend it. The other thing I do is I follow an app. I have an app by the KTCEA Elders Speak, which does some simple language teaching on Woodland Cree. I encourage you to find a way of building some Indigenous language into your days as well. The other thing I'm going to do on September the 30th is donate some money, a little bit more than is comfortable, a little bit more than is easy. One is on a slightly more national or larger scale, the Indian Residential School Survivor Society. That's a great place to direct some money. On a sort of medium level, I'm going to donate to the Bear Clan Patrol Beaver Hills House, which is a street support organization in my local neighborhood on the north side of Edmonton. So I'm going to do that. It's a little bit more than I feel I can. I'm going to take what I feel is easy and double that. And I challenge you all to do something similar. Find something easy and enjoyable, absolutely, but find something that's a little bit harder as well. Thank you for listening. Nina Naskaman, Nakama.
Well, I wish I was better informed about the events that are going to be this day, but at least I'm planning to visit downtown wearing my orange t-shirt.
We are doing this in the spirit of truth, of reconciliation, and also of active engagement. So for me, I do this in my home by sharing stories like this one that I read to my young daughter, and knowing that these are difficult stories, the difficult questions that will come from these as she grows older, answering these, addressing these, I see as part of my duty to educate, to ensure that she knows her history and that of others. And elsewhere, I advocate. So doing something simple like wearing the color orange, buying an orange t-shirt from a group that is going to donate those resources to meaningful places rather than just profiting off of them. And for me today, doing something like sending a letter to our Premier, Jason Kenney, to insist that Alberta pass legislation to recognize the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation as a provincial holiday. And I'm doing this because it's a concrete step, even if it's only a partial one. And doing something is more powerful than just saying something. And that's really important to me. So please feel free to take up your own actions and even to record your own videos and upload them onto our History Classics and Religious Studies Facebook pages. And while you're there, also check out our department statement on the day for Truth and Reconciliation and the EDIID info sheet, which provides resources to learn about this day and also to take action.